You probably experienced it plenty as well. I think most HR leaders would, of having to help your organization understand you're not here to represent your leader. You're here to represent the company. And that means you almost have to think of that they are not superior to you in a higher role than you. And again, that doesn't mean that you don't help them. You do help them, but you also know when to step away, when to not help them because they need to be able to function on their own.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TruthWorks. I'm Jessica Neal, your host. And today I actually have a friend who I haven't spoken with in many years. And I was so excited to see that she was on the schedule because, unfortunately it takes a podcast for us to catch up, but I wanted to catch up with her and I'm so excited. So I have the Chief People Officer of Uber. Her name is Nikki Krishnamurthy. We met many years ago when you were leaving Expedia. Mm-hmm. And I was at Netflix. It was before I got promoted and you were interviewing for that job.
Yes.
And that's how we got to meet.
Yes.
And I remember just loving you in that meeting because you're so smart and practical. And I feel like we approach things in a very similar way, very pragmatic and not, we're not over the top. We're just about the work, and so I felt that about you.
I was so happy to join this. And for the same reason, Jessica, I said yes to this for you.
Thank you.
It was when I got the call from our comms team and I heard that you were the one hosting. I was like, yes, I haven't caught up with her with years and it would be a fun conversation.
Yes. Well, I want to know everything, and I know our listeners want to know everything too. I mean, we'll start a little bit with just your story in general. I want you to tell people, a little bit about you and all the things that you've done because you have been, part of building some of the most famous companies that people know and experience in their day-to-day lives. And so, Expedia to Uber, but you've done so much more. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got into all this stuff.
Sure. I will take you on a quick sojourn of my career. The majority of my background is HR. I joke about the fact that I started as an HR assistant and I probably have done every HR job there is because I have so many years and just moved around. I found myself at Expedia and I was in HR and it was such a great experience, both because of my HR time, but also weirdly, I actually went off track for a little while, meaning I moved out of HR and I moved into a GM role. And I remember when Dara was first talking to me about it, I remember thinking he was crazy. Like, why would you put an HR person to run a division? What I didn't really understand is how much you learn about business when you're in HR because you're changing different groups. So you're having to constantly shift context, shift understanding business models, how to make money, how to follow the money. So I did that for 4 years and I didn't know if I'd ever actually go back into HR. And then Dara asked me to take the head of HR job at Expedia. And I waited for 2 weeks. I really reflected. People thought I was crazy, but I thought I can only do this if I still have passion for it. And I realized after that 2 weeks that I still did have a tremendous passion for HR and what it can do for businesses. And so I moved back into it. And I did that for a few years. Then I was leaving and that's when I met you. And what a great experience. Then I found myself at Uber. Dara asked me to join Uber and that was 8 years ago. And what a ride it's been. I was joking with Jessica for a moment earlier that I feel like it's 8 years, but I feel like I've worked for 5 companies. That's how much it has changed.
Yeah, these jobs that you and I have had are no joke.
Mm-hmm.
They're not for the faint of heart. And, I love that about your story that you went into the business, but I think that should happen more often than it does because, you read some of these stories out there where it's like the CHRO would make the best CEO, and it's probably true, right? But it just never really happens.
One of my biggest learnings, and it was actually very jarring to come back into HR because I'd spent 4 years really learning about my customer and trying to understand what their experience was, what their journey was, what their needs were, not just what their wants were, really understanding that. And then I came back into HR and everything was about programs and policy. And it was really hard for me to adjust. And you could argue I didn't fully adjust. I tried to bring that into HR and really think about the business, the end user experience. How do I want people to experience things as opposed to what's the policy and then therefore what is the experience?
Why? Why is it that HR teams operate this way? Why can't we operate from a business first versus policy first perspective? I don't get it.
I don't know for sure, but I think I think over time it will probably change, but I think it's that evolution from where the practice originally started, which was very much about policy and very much about programs. And I think we're in an age and entering an age where it is much more around the impact you can have on the business, but it'll take time for us to approach the practice of HR from a business standpoint as opposed to from its history. And I think we're still in that trans. I remember
it's been a long time though that we've been in this transition.
It is. And we're still getting it wrong sometimes, but then catching it. We had to do a really big layoff back in 2020 at the very early phase of the pandemic. And you haven't announced yet, you build your policy, your severance packages and all of that. And then we realized we couldn't get it down onto one piece of paper to explain what it would be. And I made the team rewrite everything. And I said, it needs to be on one page. It needs to be simple. What we realized is our package was better than the simple page. But because we started with policy, we couldn't get it down to the one page. So we wrote the one page and then rewrote the policy back up. Yeah. And it went much better, much better.
Because you think about that as like an experience getting laid off, like you don't want it to be complicated, right? No. This is a shocking, hard time. You are worried, you're concerned. All you want to know is like why and what's going to happen.
Exactly. And that needs to be simple because everything else is complex.
Right.
And so you need that to be so simple. And that's what we did, thankfully, before we launched, was catch the fact that we needed to make even this part super simple. Honestly, it's for the people that are most impacted, the ones that are being affected, but it's also for the people that are staying. We have a wonderful workforce and culture that wanted to know we were taking care of the people that were impacted. These are their colleagues. These are their friends. And so it was both for the employees being affected, but it was also for the employees that would be staying and making sure they could comprehend my company, a sigh of relief. My company is taking care of my colleague. My company is taking care of my friend. At least I know that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to get into this, but I never really thought about myself as like an HR person. Like I never aligned to that. Like I didn't grow up in HR. I came up through recruiting and I really thought about my mission as like I was the chief effectiveness officer. Right. Mm-hmm. It was my job to make the company more effective. And I did that by rolling out products via people. Right. Mm-hmm. But it was really like product innovation, not program or policy innovation. Right. And it was really about, products that would ease the friction in the system and allow people to work more efficiently and effectively together. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, well, let's talk about that for you and the context of Uber, because I know when you walked into Uber and Dara convinced you to take this next job, it probably was a bit overwhelming. There's lots of stories out there about the culture, it being famous, in Silicon Valley and around the world. And I think you and I were kind of talking earlier before we started recording, but maybe a bit broken, right? So tell us, like, you walk in and where are things day one when you step in there?
Well, it was super broken. I remember my very first day, literally first day, there was no less than 5 employee relations escalations up to Dara. And he's forwarding them on to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I walk into? And of course, because you haven't started, you're not actually allowed to have access to all of that information until you're actually an employee. So it wasn't that I didn't want to do my due diligence. I didn't have that context. So I just remember that very first day, it just, wow, we have some really basic things we have to manage, fix. I also observed probably within the first week, maybe not the first day, there was definitely broken trust. There was broken trust with the workforce to the leadership, but there was also broken trust with the leadership of the workforce. There were a lot of leaks of private confidential information, and that was getting out into the public. So therefore, then that makes the leadership very hesitant to share and be transparent. And so I think the leadership felt like the workforce didn't trust them. They didn't really fully recognize they didn't trust the workforce as well, that this was a two-way dynamic that was going on. And that was, like I said, in week 1, escalations of employee relations investigations, the lack of trust both ways. How am I going to fix this? And there's so much more. And you made the comment about, chief effectiveness officer. I've actually always thought that, even though I did grow up within the HR, I always looked at my role was to make the business better. I never felt like my job was to make a leader better. My job was to make the business better. And sometimes that was helping the leader be more effective. Sometimes that was saying that leader can't be effective and we need to take that leader out.
Right.
And so I always kept the company as my North Star.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I navigated all of those different things of, what was going on with the employee relations stuff. What I actually found was we didn't have any issues that other companies don't have. We didn't have even more volume of issues than other companies don't have. What we had was not addressing them. What we had is a lack of the number of people to be able to address them. We just didn't have the infrastructure. The company just grew too fast to keep up with what was going on. But that was very insightful for me. I expected there to be more issues, worse issues, and it wasn't. There were serious issues, but all companies face serious issues.
Yeah, we all had them.
Yeah. And what I found is I just had to put that infrastructure in, and I had to teach the organization that the leader was not the decision maker. Kind of call it do the right thing was the decision maker, not the leader and all of their preconceived ideas of how to handle different issues.
Right. Like, they probably don't know
Mm-hmm.
generally how to handle most of these things.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
And you had people that thought that that was their job. That's again where I kept the North Star of the company and not any one person.
Yeah.
And this organization, because it had moved and grown so fast, everybody thought, well, I'll look to my leader to tell me what to do, as opposed to let me think my job is to support the company. And therefore, I need to have judgment myself about how to do that.
Right. Yeah. I used to tell my team, yes, we are in service of the company, but we are not servants, meaning you are not to go off and do their work for them. Like, we are influencing them to make the business better. And it's through influence and teaching them. And, I don't know, there's a whole other thing we could go off on and teaching leaders, but I don't think enough companies really invest in helping leaders become great leaders. And it's, it's unfortunate, but, there's a lot of teams out there that just do what the leaders want, and that generally doesn't work all that well.
No, you probably experienced it plenty as well. I think most HR leaders would, of having to help your organization understand you're not here to represent your leader. You're here to represent the company. And that means you almost have to think of that they are not superior to you in a higher role than you. And again, that doesn't mean that you don't help them. You do help them, but you also know when to step away, when to not help them because they need to be able to function on their own.
Yeah.
So our roles cause us to have a lot of judgment,
It really does. I often say that I think this is the hardest role in the C-suite. And I don't know, I think you'll probably agree, but I mean, the job has just shifted and changed so much over the years. And of course, you're the HR strategist and the talent strategist and all those things, but you're the chief medical officer, you're the chief diversity officer, you're the COO in many ways. Now you're the chief AI officer, and you have to know all of those things. And then the other headwind that I think this role has that maybe the other C-level roles don't have is that every single person in the company thinks that they can do your job. You know, they don't question the chief product officer the way that they question you. They don't question the CFO the way that they question you, but because everybody's a person.
Yes.
And so, you know, everybody has an opinion, right? Or they worked at Facebook or they worked at Google and that's how they did it there. And so of course that's how you should do it here, right?
Jessica, I love you. It's so nice to talk to somebody that has walked in these shoes. I mean, everything you just said there in that 30 seconds speaks to me, speaks to my heart, speaks to my brain. But Dara and I have actually talked about it a lot. I had said to him one time, he was dealing with a lot of stuff, and I said, I'm really sorry you're going through this. You're in such a lonely role. And he stopped and he said, no, Nikki, he said, your role is harder than mine. He said, you really are in the hardest job of the company, and it is the most lonely. You carry so much for so many people. And I have to say, it felt so good to have somebody just that doesn't do this role to understand what was going on. But then you went on to say all those other things you're trying to be the head of. And then you ended with exactly that and you're dealing with the fact that everybody thinks they can do your job. But they also think they can do it better than you.
Better.
Not just do it, but they think they can do it better than you.
Yeah. And it's such a weird thing, you know, and it really is hard to navigate. And you have a lot of weight on you as you're describing, but you also you got to figure out how to compartmentalize and not care, you know, and it's not, and I mean, not care about the company and not care about the people. That's not what I'm talking about, but not care when you have all of this noise around you, when you know the right thing to do.
You have to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. You have to compartmentalize is the name of the game. You absolutely. You know, we're just talking about work. Imagine then compartmentalizing from a personal life as well, right?
Exactly.
And how do you do that? How do you stay calm? One of my direct reports, actually, he is at Netflix. He is excellent. And he was with me for a couple of years when I first joined Uber. And I remember in my first week, he said to me, Nikki, what we need is strategic calmness. We desperately need strategic calmness because we are definitely a go-get-it culture. Like just run after that wall, bust through that wall. And doing that all the time without thought for where do we need to pause? Where do we need to calm ourselves down? And I've always stuck when Nunj said to me, strategic calmness. That has been a part of my lexicon for the last 8 years because of him saying that to me. And that's what you have to do is compartmentalize, calm things down. I remember when I was doing the layoffs in 2020, I felt like I was fighting the whole company because we knew the business had fallen off a cliff.
Right.
And so we knew we had to do it. And the leadership team had pulled together to say we had to do it. But then it became my job to execute on it, to determine, plan it, execute on it. And you're doing it globally. And so you're dealing with legal and regulations. You're dealing with cultures. And everyone told me I was doing it wrong. Everybody had their way of doing it or upset I wouldn't give them exceptions. And I remember telling my team, we have to keep the most impacted people front and center. That's who we're solving for. We're not solving for all these leaders that think that they are the right and they know how to do it. We're not even solving for all the lawyers. I care about the human being that is going to have a conversation that their job is impacted. That's who we're solving for.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes those lawyers don't think about that.
No, they don't.
They just don't. But that's who they are. But okay. So I want to talk about a couple things that you brought up. One, before I get to the next question, you talked about a lot of trust issues when you joined Uber. And that's a hard thing to shift in a culture and in a large organization too, because when you started, how many people was Uber roughly?
When I first started, 16,000.
Yeah. That's a lot of people and a lot of leaders. And some of those things run real deep. So how did you shift trust? Like, how did you even do that?
Yeah. Well, a couple different things. One is what was really good is Dara is also naturally a transparent person. He joined though a year before me. So I had seen he had already been affected by this culture. And I was a bit shocked seeing him when I joined. I was like, wow, this is not the Dara I know. Dara's usually much more transparent than this.
Yeah.
But his foundation, who he is underneath all that, is transparent. So some of it was getting Dara to get more comfortable with being more transparent. Some of it was talking to the different leaders about how we were impacting the workforce. And then honestly, some of it was I had to do investigations and find people that were leaking. And everybody had told me it was not possible. Everybody told me that I would not be able to do it. And I just had to have faith that if I could just find one, it would then permeate through the company because nobody had ever had any repercussions for it.
Right.
And so I knew just normal human nature and rumor mill would take over. If I could find one genuine, authentic case where I found somebody, and I did. And that, I think we've had one leak in years and years, and we've only gotten more and more transparent with our workforce. And it was helping people understand that transparency is an entitlement. It is not to be weaponized, but it is to give you enough information if it's the right information to give you so that you can know what's going on and you can operate and you can understand the context within your work environment.
Yeah.
But that is what I think I walked into is a workforce that had taken information and transparency to an entitlement level and wanting information that was not appropriate for them to have, but it had just snowballed. And getting leader on the other hand, so that was the workforce. And then on the other hand, getting the leaders to understand how much more effective the employees would be if we were transparent, how much more you could get them aligned, moving faster if they had the context that you have.
Right.
So it was really working through both sides.
Yeah. That I imagine quite hard and not easy. I do think, and that was at a time too where, that entitlement culture and employee kind of pro-employee, which I'm all pro-employee, but I think the pendulum swung a little bit too pro. And then managers were, I don't know, intimidated and scared to piss off employees.
Absolutely.
And I was like, what are we doing? Like, you can't, no, we have to tell them the truth. And we cannot buy into this entitlement. It's not going to work, right?
It's another great point, and we had to navigate through that. And that was through building out our employee relations function. I remember telling our head of employee relations many times, we've overtrained our employees to trigger an investigation. And we've supported that by investigating everything. Right. We have to get back to the days where you do a preliminary look and you say, is there enough here to found a full-blown investigation? Whereas for a couple of years, what we were doing is we were investigating anything. So again, we were telling the employees they were doing it right, no matter what.
Right.
Something that is still here, but nowhere near as bad as it was before is nepotism became so people in their head, nepotism was bad. So therefore, people were making employee relations complaints if somebody's friend got hired. And I was like, but it wasn't the hiring manager. There's so many things on this of what we should never hire from our networks. There's a wonderful wealth of people to hire. Right. Why would we ever not want to hire people that come from our own networks?
Yeah.
And that's that extreme level of we had overtrained employees to think these ways. And it was getting an employee relations group that stopped investigating everything, reviewed everything, but stopped
of course.
An investigation. Also giving a range of recommendations, not jumping to black and white. Well, if this occurred, you must do this. Mm-hmm. But here's the range of repercussions that could happen. And sometimes they included termination, but sometimes it was a final written warning. And again, I think years earlier, it had been jump to the termination. Yeah. So that's what caused managers to be scared and worried that if I would rather not piss somebody off and have no investigation than do the right thing.
Right.
And so our cultural value of do the right thing, period. We don't even explain what it means. It literally has the word period right after it. And it was that of saying, we were not going to give you the manual on what is do the right thing.
Yeah.
It is literally, you have to have judgment. You have to build judgment. You have to build instinct. And that doesn't mean you have to do it on your own. There's people you can talk to and guide you and all of that, but we're not giving you a manual of what is do the right thing.
Like, gotta use your brain. You gotta have some judgment around this. And if it sounds wrong, it's probably wrong, Just don't do it. Okay, well, I want to talk about you and Dara for a minute, because as we were talking before we started recording, the relationship between the CEO and the CHRO is such an important one. And when the chemistry is good, and just like I've experienced and you've experienced, it can be magical, right?
Sure.
Like it's like you're a power couple, right? You can get so much done. And I had that at Netflix, and you've had that with Dara at Expedia and now at Uber. But when that relationship isn't good, this role is even harder to navigate than what we were describing a few minutes ago. It's almost impossible to navigate.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about your relationship, why it's so special, why it works, and then maybe we can give some advice to some other CHROs who may be navigating that relationship or, having some chemistry issues.
Sure. So, little, again, sojourn on the history of me and Dara rather than just my career. When I was at Expedia, I was the head of HR of a division, not of the company. And that was, we call it Expedia.com. And Dara was the CEO. I had worked with him a little bit because I had earlier in a previous role, I had been the head of HR for technology. So I had interacted with him a little bit for that. But just a little bit. Expedia.com was not doing well. And so Dara decided to take over that president role himself and do it. And he was really good about keeping my boss, the head of HR, for the corporate things and started using me for the division things. And so that was where we first started to build our relationship. What I think he realized relatively quickly, because I had already established relationships across the group, was in the staff meetings, I was making them talk about the things that they weren't talking about naturally. I was pointing out the elephants in the room. I was pointing out where the business wasn't effective. So what he described later was it felt like a business person sitting in the room. I couldn't figure out which group you were responsible for, because you could talk about marketing or you could talk about the website and you could talk about the metrics. You just were all over the place. And I didn't even really hear you talk about people. But of course, people were behind what you were talking about.
Right, of course, yeah.
So I think it was that thing that you and I were talking about earlier of not approaching HR from an HR standpoint, but approaching it from an effectiveness standpoint. He recognized that in me relatively early. And then I also think I was very blunt with my feedback with him. And again, because he wasn't just the president, he was the CEO. I think he had spent a lot of years with people not telling him the truth about things or not being as direct about things. And I remember one time he came in to this leadership team that was, like I said, quite frankly, failing. Like the business was not performing. And he talked about the fact that he had to let somebody else go in a different division. And he walked back out of the room. And I literally chased him. And we got to his desk and I said, "Can I give you some feedback?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And I said, "That didn't go very well." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Dara," I said, "you have a group of leaders that they know they're failing. They know this division is actually doing worse than the other one. And you just walked in, told them that you're letting that other leader go and walked back out and gave them no context." He's like, "Well, so?" And I said, "They're scared shitless. They're now more scared than they were before. Do you think you're going to get the best out of them if they're scared?" He's like, "What did I do?" And I'm like, "You go back in there and you say, I made a mistake. I need to give you more transparency, more context on what happened and why."
Yeah.
And he said, "Really?" I'm like, "Yes, you're going to go in there and you're going to say, I made a mistake and let me tell you." And so he did. He said, he came back in and he said, "Well, I've gotten some feedback. I didn't handle that very well." And the whole room looked at me. The whole room was like, "Well, that came from Nikki. Nikki would have been the one to do that."
Yes. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. And so I think also to help people establish that is understand and make sure that they're ready to hear feedback, but understand, especially when you're dealing with senior level people, they are used to people yesing them. They are used to people not telling them the information, even if they are, it's not as direct to be able to tangibly act on it. And that has been the foundation of mine and Dara's relationship ever since then. I remember telling him he couldn't fire somebody because we needed to stabilize, and he was super mad at me. He was like, no, I can't work with this person anymore. I said, us stabilizing this division is more important than your ability to work with them. Figure it out. Like, that's what you need to do. Figure it out. I remember when I was coming on interviewing at Uber, I could sense a lot of the leaders didn't want me. And what I realized after I joined is they were worried, and they had shared with Dara, they were worried because Dara and I had a working relationship that I would come in and be a yes person. And Dara was only a year in, so he wasn't fully established with them yet. And he would chuckle in his head when they would say that to him. He's like, oh God, you don't know. You don't know. Nikki does not listen to me.
Right.
And I think that has been the foundation of our relationship for 13 years of I just very respectful. I am thoughtful about, where his own mental mind is, but I'm also very, very direct with him. Even when I disagree, and I disagree and commit. There are times that I'm like, hey, you're the boss. I've challenged you on this 5 times. Tell me when the door's closed and I'll get on board.
Yeah. No, but it's such a hard place to be because you really literally are almost the only person that will tell them the truth. Right?
Yep.
And there might be one other person that'll go there a little bit, but none that go there like you. And you're bringing them news that they don't always want to hear. Just like your example of like, guess what? It's not about you. It's about stabilizing this organization. Sorry. Right. And of course he's mad at you. And that happened to me many a times where they're so mad, but they know you're right. And then they end up doing it.
Place to have that reaction too of like, I do think others will give him direct, honest feedback, especially now, right?
Yeah.
There's other times that, my role is to understand his role and, help him take in everything he's hearing and sort through it and figure out, okay, are you listening to this piece? Are you, listen to it, but in a year, not quite yet. We have something else. Yeah. And so I think it's understanding how to help them be effective.
Right.
And sometimes that's super direct, and sometimes that's giving them a safe place
to vent. Right. Because we were talking about the loneliness of the CHRO role, which I think is a real thing, but the CEO role is also very lonely. And you really are that person, that only person that they can vent to and tell you all the things that they can't say in front of anybody else because it won't go over well at all, right? But they need that because, mentally and emotionally that the toll and the burden on them is incredibly hard and strong,
Yeah.
I always, and I think I had a very similar approach too. It's like, okay, I'm going to tell you and you don't agree now. I'm going to tell you a few more times, right? And then I would always say, okay, I get that you don't want to hear this right now. I get that you don't want to deal with it. It's your choice. You're the boss. I'm not going to bring it up again. Okay. And I'll give it 6 months. And if it's still there, I might bring it up again. But also, you're a data guy. And in the time that we've been working together, when have I ever been wrong? And he was like, never. And I'm like, okay, well, your choice, but I would always kind of like, you do have to pick the hills that you're going to die on.
Pick the hills you're going to die on. Pick the timing. I mean, that's what I think you were describing you have probably been right so much more than you would have ever been wrong. And yet sometimes it was still, let's delay on me being right. Let's deal with it later. And it's understanding the timing as well, when you can tolerate things.
Yeah.
You're maybe slightly more nice than me. I never give up my right to bring it up again. I just say, I sense that you're done. So the door's closing. I'm going to get on the boat, but I'll bring it back up if I need to.
Yeah.
So, but I don't give it time. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
ship will be back at the dock at some point.
But this is where I will disagree and truly commit. I remember we were hiring an executive role and I interviewed, and within 30 minutes, I knew the person was not the right fit. And I told him, and he was like, no, you got it wrong. I really think this person is good. I said, I think you like intellect, and I think you saw intellect. Let me be clear. There's good aspects of this person, but intellect doesn't translate to impact. And this person will not have an impact. He begged me to re-interview, give another chance. And I did. And I said, look, I see some of the stuff you see. I still don't believe that we should hire. Here's my concerns. He convinced me to hire, or beat me into hiring. And so I did. And then we were going to tell a small group of executives about this hire because he was very excited about it. And he told them why he thought this was a great person. And then he said, well, but Nikki disagrees. And I think Nikki should share her thoughts. Again, he's very transparent and he likes people to disagree with him. And so I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he was like, no, I think you should share it, Nikki. And I said, no, I agree with Dara. I think this person's good, but just like we always know, it's really hard to onboard to this company in an executive role. I talked to him later. I kept him after the meeting and I said, Dara, when I disagree and commit, I disagree and commit. You do not set a new hire up by telling his peers that the head of HR disagrees. I'm like, and he's like, oh shit, I screwed that up. And I said, he's like, what do I do? I said, nothing. I recovered for you. I didn't share. And he said, but Dara, your role, my role now is to make this person as successful as we can. You do not tell what will be his peers that I disagreed. He's like, I will never, ever make that mistake again. I'm sorry. And I said, that's okay.
Your relationship with him, because it reminds me of mine with Reed, but I think it's a rare thing.
Well, it needs a Dara. To be honest, it needs somebody like a Dara that wants to be challenged. Somebody like Dara that wants different varying points of view. He has such tolerance for varying points of view.
Same
such
with Reed.
Tolerance. Yeah, I think he does. Reed does too.
Yeah.
Such a desire to be better. And I think Reed's that same way too. Dara always, the person Dara is today is not the person I met 13 years ago. He is very, very different. The person Dara is today is not the person he was 8 years ago when I joined Uber. And so I think you need a Dara and you need a Reed for some of that.
Yeah, somebody you do. It does. I mean, and those guys are rare too, I mean, and to almost be that self-aware and selfless, but like a constant learner and constantly trying to evolve themselves and get better and better. And not to say that, I mean, everybody has an ego, but theirs are mostly checked, right? So that is rare. I coach HROs and I am coaching this one, and and we were kind of navigating this very crucial conversation that they need to have. And I was like, well, unfortunately, you're the only one that's going to tell them. And they're like, but I could get fired, for telling this truth. And I'm like, yeah, you can, hopefully you won't, because they'll want it, and they may not agree with you completely. They may not agree with you at all. Right. But if they see that you are putting the company first and them first, hopefully, they're going to listen. They're going to think about it, right? They're going to be reflective on it, even if they don't agree in the moment. But it's hard being the mirror.
Yeah, it's very hard. It goes back to what you said, though, Jessica, is it's also getting to the point in your career that you understand the chemistry matters so much. And if this person speaks the truth, and of course has to do it in a respectful way, right time, all of that. But if the person does all those things and the other one reacts by wanting to let them go, I know it might be hard in the moment, but they probably should go. Because
absolutely.
They're not going to do their best work there. Because that person is coming from that place of, I need to speak the truth to help you, to help the company. And if that other person reacts by firing them, they will probably in a year or two land somewhere that their career is much better off. Their life is much better. Their impact is much better because they left that person that couldn't let them be who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is sort of tapping into the advice. Like, what's your advice to CHROs who are navigating this relationship? And, obviously, timing, respect, and all of those things. But how do you think that they should approach this role with the CEO?
Well, with this role, specifically with the CEO, I think giving time to build trust. I think there's nothing wrong unless something really big happens right away. I think build small moments of trust, build small moments of giving feedback. I definitely do this even still to this day with Dara. Are you up for some feedback? And there has been moments where he was like, no, I'm so tired. We talk a lot on Fridays and Friday afternoons. And, there's been time, no, God, no, please, no. And so ask. I do that with a lot of people. Yeah. What role do you want me to play? Do you want me to just be a listener? Do you want me to be a mirror? Do you want me to push you? I do that a lot with people, including Dara. Somebody will come and share something with me and I'll just pause and say, I could play so many roles. How about I ask you, what role would you like me to play right now?
I love that. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Gosh. Okay. We're running out of time, which is crazy. So I want to talk a little bit about AI in this role, because I think a lot of organizations are navigating this. I know you guys are probably at the forefront of utilizing AI in the organization and also in your product. But talk to us a little bit about that journey at Uber and what are you guys doing? How are you approaching it?
Yeah, we are approaching it, what I would say is almost very organically. It is moving so quickly, meaning both the adoption, but the actual AI technology itself is improving day over day, month over month. So we are approaching it organically where we're very focused on employee adoption and becoming familiar with the tools, using them. We are also approaching it very programmatically, meaning very loosely making sure we have training classes, making sure we have tiger teams that can go into teams that are requesting and say, hey, we can help you use AI in these different ways and getting it up and running. But the reason I say organically is, as I just said, you have to ask for those resources. We're not forcing those resources on you. And what we're finding is some teams are adopting it so quickly, they don't need a tiger team. Like a tiger team would slow them down because the tiger team doesn't necessarily have their functional context.
Right.
Other teams need the tiger team to come in and help identify and do things and get kind of spurred along. What we're also finding is, I'm sure it will impact jobs over time. But I think when it first started happening, and even before, a lot of people felt like a lot of entry-level jobs would go away. And what we're finding is we're getting a lot of people that want to hire college grads fresh out because they're much more comfortable with AI. So, we think of it as AI native. And they're not really AI native, but they're as close as you could get to AI native. Right. And so we're not actually seeing that impact. We're seeing more demand from hiring managers to hire college grads, not less. Yeah. And so we're kind of trying to approach it in multiple ways. I think over time we will get more directive, but we feel like directive would actually slow it down right now. We want the org to kind of learn.
Yeah, you don't want them to be fearful of it. You want them to be excited about it and jumping in and learning and experimenting. Yep. That's what we're all doing that. We're experimenting. Like nobody knows. Like nobody's figured it out. Like if so, they would tell us how to do it.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's just getting better and better and better. Year after year, right? Yeah. And so what's possible today, 6 months from now, it's going to be
so much more will be possible.
So much more, right? Yeah. So I love that.
One of my key messages, because I see it both in the headlines, but even what the conversation looks like internally, I do worry that companies like ours, meaning the bigger companies, more established, are too focused on AI from an efficiency standpoint. And the smaller companies will invent new things because of AI. And so that's a key message I've been sending internally is don't get caught up in all the headlines. Don't get caught up in what arguably is the easier way to identify what to do with AI. Be bold. And we always want to be bold and creative. Go be it. Yeah. What can you invent today that was not possible yesterday? Yeah. Leave the efficiency stuff. It's okay. We'll get back around to the efficiency stuff.
Yeah. We were talking the other day and it's there's the innovation part around AI, but then there's the commodity part. The efficiency is a commodity. That'll just be there.
We'll
Like
keep
what?
finding those things. In
Yeah,
3 years,
right.
we'll still find more efficiency for AI.
Right.
But
But to your
go.
point, like innovate something, like make
Mm-hmm.
something new.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my biggest call out for companies, for HR leaders, for CEOs, or business leaders of more established companies. If don't let the startups disrupt you because they don't have any efficiency that they need.
Yeah.
They need to create. And
Yeah. They're already
so,
efficient.
yeah, exactly.
They're not big and bloated yet.
Mm-mm. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. So that's
exactly.
my big watch out for AI right now.
I think that that's good. Okay, we're going to do two things. One, I forgot to tell you, and before we started recording, we do these things called career confessions. It's where
Okay.
so listeners send in questions and we give them work advice.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that all day long, so you're going to be brilliant at it. But the other thing I always ask my guests to do is to leave, and you've already given so much great advice, but to leave the listeners in general, like a little nugget of some advice, some stuff to think about,
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
inspiration, because we all need more of that these days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
what's the advice you want to give today?
I think two things. I think a lot of headlines, a lot of programs are focused on how do you develop your weaknesses? How do you get better at your weaknesses? I have navigated my whole career, and I think it's worked well in trying to position myself in roles that leverage my superpowers. And I think we don't always take the time to think what are our superpowers and what roles will benefit from our superpowers. I think there's so much research to say when we're learning and developing something that we're already good at, we will learn so much better and faster. We don't talk about that a lot.
Yeah, we
And
don't.
so think about what are your superpowers and think about the roles, the jobs, the projects that will really benefit from your superpowers. That doesn't mean you shouldn't develop your weaknesses. We want to be as well-rounded as possible, but everyone has gifts. Nobody has all the gifts. So you're never going to fill those deficits to the level you could actually excel with your superpowers. So that would be one piece of advice.
Okay.
The second would be run towards what you're scared of. Run towards what you're scared of. I mentioned when I didn't go into the head of HR job for 2 weeks, really what I reflected on it wasn't just do I still have passion for it. I was scared. I was scared. When I took that GM role, I was scared. I thought Dara was crazy. I didn't know if I wanted the Uber job. Like I knew that I would make mistakes. As I said, you just not infallible. And do I really want to fail on that global of a platform? Do I really want to show my deficits on that global of a platform? But what I realized as I was reflecting was that I wouldn't think any job after that one was exciting. I was like, if I don't take this job, I'm going to be like, what job is going to be as exciting as that one? So
None.
run towards what you're scared of.
I love that. I love both of those things. On the strengths thing, you reminded me, I used to talk about this a lot at Netflix. We were such a critical culture. And
Mm-hmm.
it was always like, how can we get better? How can we get better? We never talked about the things that we were good at. And I was like, if we want people to do even better, like they're on their weaknesses, of course, we want them to get better, but they're probably going to be tiny bit better than they were.
Mm-hmm.
But let's tell them what they're great at so that they can double down on that and do it 20 more times. Because if they do that 20 more times,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be great for us.
Right.
So
You can
how
still
do
be
we give?
capable of your superpower. Like you didn't leverage your superpower or you over leveraged your superpower.
Right.
I love that you were giving Netflix that advice.
But like they didn't even know that we valued those superpowers because it was always on the stuff that they could do better. And so it was like, we got to give love to the strengths. So I love that and such great advice. Okay. So we're going to go into career confession. Okay. So here's a little context and then from the person and then I'll read you their question. So I used to think culture was mostly values and messaging until I realized it's really tested by whether hiring incentives and performance systems reinforce the behaviors you want. From your role leading HR, recruiting, workplace at Uber, what early measurable signals tell you an organization's culture and leadership are genuinely healthy before issues surface?
Great question. And I love the fact that the listener is thinking about things more than just as values. So many people boil values down to behaviors. And what the listener said also is we do think about real values are what you hire and fire because of. You hire and fire. And I can tell a quick anecdotal story of one of our values after we rewrote them is called forest and trees. And it wasn't called forest and trees at the time. It was just the concept of you need to understand the details to be able to pick back up and potentially affect the strategy because you know the details that matter. And somebody that understands the strategy that can go find the details that need to be managed. It was just that
by the way.
Mm-hmm. It's just that concept. And the marketing team came to me because this is when we were coming up with the words. They said, Nikki, do you think you could influence Dara to drop this one? Because we were still in the massaging. And I laughed at them. I said, you better find some words for this one because this is the one Dara most fires for. He fires for this. So I pick up to then more specifically answer the question. I pick up the signals of when on that one, using that as an example, I pick up on the signals when I see somebody just operating at this superficial level. Mm-hmm. Strategy can feel superficial. It's not. It is understanding the details. So if somebody's just operating off of this, I start talking about like, hey, where's the details? Get into the details. On the flip side, I see some people not be able to pull up. They're so in the details. I never hear them talk about the bigger picture, but they're constantly pointing out all these random things. And so I'm not clear. Do you understand the details that matter? There's plenty of details, but do you understand the details that matter? And so those on that specific one, but I could do it for all of our values of where are those early signals that people are really going to be able to operate here for all of them.
Yeah, no, I love that. And if you want to go high, you have to be able to go low. And if you want to be high, you have to go low. You know, it's like you gotta know the full picture. I love that. And I do agree. Like there are signals that you will get on the things that you hire and fire for. And just like if the culture is operating as it should be, you're going to get the signals. There's tension in the system, right? Mm-hmm. There's conflicts between these teams. There's context missing. There's, consensus happening. There's, you and I know all the things. There are too many of them. But I just have to say my heart is full because I just am so happy you came on. But I'm also sad that it took a podcast for you and I to hang out. Like
it would be great if we keep in touch this time.
Please. Yes. I'm begging you because you're just so amazing and the work that you do is so great. And I wish there were more HR leaders like you in the world. And hopefully some of them that are listening will be so inspired by all the things that you had to say. And all the
right back at you. My heart is warm after this conversation of talking to somebody that has walked a mile in these shoes, somebody that just can articulate it, not just experience it, but articulate it. You have no idea how much more energized I'm walking away of just feeling seen and heard, right? It's a little bit cliche sometimes, but it really does matter. And so my heart is warm from the conversation.
When you're lonely, you call me.
Okay.
Because you know what? That is one thing I didn't do as much. Mm-hmm. Because I was it's so consuming.
It's so consuming.
It's so consuming. I did not pick up the phone and say, Nikki, I need you. Because, and the people like in my life, like my husband didn't get it.
No, I know.
My dad didn't, it's like, it's hard. So call me. I'm here.
You'll be my person now, Jessica.
Okay,
You'll be my
perfect.
person. I appreciate that very much.
Yes. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to TruthWorks.